pasta sauces seem harmless, rich, savory, comforting. But for seniors, the hidden dangers are real. From jars loaded with excess sodium, sugar, and preservatives, to recalls over botched batches harboring bacteria, the sauces you trust may be quietly harming your heart, kidneys, or blood pressure. Today, we're uncovering 9 pasta sauces to avoid at all costs, and revealing 2 that are truly safe. Starting off with number 9, we've got Ragu Old World Style, the jar that promises homemade flavor but once shipped a different surprise: bits of plastic. In 2019, Mizcan America, the parent company, voluntarily recalled multiple Ragu jars after production checks found possible plastic fragments in some batches. That recall covered several Old World-style varieties and led to product pulls and consumer alerts. It's the kind of quality failure that breaks a brand's promise of kitchen-made safety. You pop a lid, and the first smell should be warm tomato and garlic. Instead, think of an off note, a faint chemical edge, the sort of smell you notice and then try to forget. The immediate worry with hard fragments is obvious: physical injury, but for seniors the concern goes beyond that. A compromised run in a plant often means inspections and corrective actions, and when manufacturing controls fail, other problems can slip through: uneven heating, flawed sealing, or missed metal detection checks. Any of those can raise the chance of microbiological spoilage or foreign bodies. That matters if you rely on steady, predictable food. For someone on blood thinners, an unreported foreign object and a surprise hospital visit is exactly what you don't need. There's a second, quieter betrayal: sodium. A lot of Ragu-style jarred sauces are built for flavor at scale, and flavor at scale often equals salt. Many supermarket pasta sauces run several hundred milligrams of sodium per half-cup serving. A heavy ladle across a plate can push a senior close to daily salt limits. If you're on a blood pressure medicine that pairs poorly with sodium shifts, that extra salt can blunt the benefits of your prescription and raise readings you thought were under control. The brand's label and old-world phrasing suggest home-cooked trust. The reality? A mass-produced product where one production line error can have ripple effects. What to watch for in a jar: swollen lids, unexpected off-odors, cloudy sauce that separates oddly, or a label recall notice. If a brand issues a recall, don't assume it must be fine. Check the code on your jar and the official recall list. And if you find a physical fragment in your food, save the jar, photos, and the batch code. That's how public health officials trace problems and stop repeats. For seniors or anyone on meds, the rule is simple: when a jar's production run has a known defect, plastic in the mix, treat the whole brand with more caution until you can confirm your specific product is unaffected. Ever opened a jar and found something you didn't expect? Tell us what it was and how the store handled it. The homemade smell should comfort you, not hide the memory of a factory fault. One flawed run can mean a jar on your shelf that's not what the label promised. Ragu's recall proves even household staples can fail at the factory. For seniors, that kind of surprise is the worst kind of pantry risk. Coming in at number 8, we've got Prego Traditional Italian, a brand that sells real tomatoes and simple flavor, but which has a history of recalls and spoilage issues that cut through that promise. In late 2013, Campbell recalled specific Prego jars over spoilage risk after the company found certain cases that could be at risk. While that recall was limited in scope, it's exactly the kind of event that undermines a brand's safe pantry claim. You crack the lid expecting bright tomato and a warm basil note. Spoiled jars show a different profile: faint sourness, small bubbles, or a seam that looks pushed. Spoilage in sealed jars typically points to underprocessing or a bad seal, both things factories are supposed to control every run. For seniors, a swallowed jar of spoiled sauce isn't just a stomach ache. It can trigger dehydration, vomiting, or an infection that knocks blood pressure meds and diabetes medication schedules out of sync. The whole "trust your pantry" idea collapses if a familiar jar gives you an unexpected illness. The other betrayal here is nutrition math. Many mass-market sauces use added sugars and salt to mask flavor variability across seasons. Label claims like traditional and real tomatoes can hide added ingredients that bump glucose and sodium. Seniors watching blood sugar or following a low-sodium plan are especially vulnerable. One bowl of pasta with a high-sodium sauce can undo a careful day of limits. Independent testing and nutrition panels show that traditional jars vary widely in sugar and salt content. Not all simple jars are equal. Practical tip: check jar codes before you buy, inspect the lid for a clean vacuum seal, and store opened jars correctly, in the fridge and within recommended days. If a trusted brand has had spoilage recalls, rotate your pantry stock and buy smaller jars so you don't sit on an old production run by mistake. If a senior in your household is frail or on meds that require stable intake, treat any recall history as a significant strike. Have you ever bought a jar of sauce that tasted off the next day? Name the brand and what gave it away. Smell, look, or a weird fizz. Traditional on a label shouldn't mean trust me blindly. Spoilage can happen after production fails. Prego's spoilage recall shows that even comfort food jars aren't immune to factory errors. For seniors, a bad jar matters more than a ruined dinner. Want to stay ahead of food dangers and hidden risks? Hit subscribe now so you don't miss the facts that could protect your health. At number 7, we've got Classico tomato and basil, a jar that sells itself on simple ingredients and rustic charm. Third-party product safety databases, however, have flagged Classico for moderate processing concerns and ingredient processing issues, which raises the practical question. When a sauce looks fresh, did the plant keep pH and pasteurization tightly in control? That's not theoretical. Low-acid or under-processed jars can create conditions where bacteria or spoilage organisms survive. You lift the lid expecting a clean basil aroma. The risk shows up not as obvious rot but as tiny changes. A slightly sweet off-note, mild separation, or a jar that feels soft at the seams. Acidity control is the industry's basic safety check. The FDA and industry guidelines set pH targets to prevent botulism and other hazards. When processing is uneven, any small lapse in heat treatment or acid balance can let microbes gain a foothold. We've seen small producers recalled for underprocessing and swollen jars. The hazard is real, and senior immune systems tolerate foodborne bugs poorly. Classico's moderate processing score from independent watchdogs doesn't mean the jars are always unsafe. Many plants run cleanly, but it means you should watch for signs and prefer brands that publish clear testing and low-sodium recipes if you're managing heart or kidney issues. A tomato basil scent doesn't guarantee safe acidity or uniform sterilization. For older adults, the margin for error is smaller. A single bout of foodborne illness can cause dehydration, interfere with medication timing, and lead to hospitalization. What to do? Prefer single-ingredient labels, check for official recalls in your state's public health feed, and avoid jars with swollen lids or cloudy liquid. If you like basil-forward sauces, consider making a small batch at home. You control the acidity and can refrigerate fresh jars for only a few days. For seniors with immune suppression, stick to brands with strong safety records and transparent lab testing. Do you trust a fresh jar to be safe? Tell us whether you'd make sauce at home or buy from a brand with archived test results. Basil can smell innocent, but acid and heat are the quiet guards you can't see. If processing slips, that pleasant scent hides risk. Classico's score suggests caution. When a jar's safety depends on unseen steps, seniors should pick brands with clear testing and low-sodium formulas. Arriving at number 6, we've got Bertolli Organic, a familiar label that leans on organic and Mediterranean vibes. The trouble, large parent companies and supply chains have had notable recalls in oil and olive products, and jarred goods can suffer separate issues like underprocessing or contamination. D'Olio, a major player tied to Bertolli and Carapelli, has had recalls and quality alerts in past years. Those supply chain problems show how a trusted name can still experience lapses that matter to consumers. You twist the cap and expect a silky tomato perfume with olive oil notes. Instead, product issues that lead to recalls range from glass fragments in unrelated bakery products to oxidation or underprocessing in sauces elsewhere. Not all tied directly to Bertolli, but the pattern is clear. Big supply chains sometimes miss a step. In some recent years, the brand family has pulled products for oxidation or unexpected residues in oils. That same vulnerability, an oversight in a run, can show up in sauce plants as well. For seniors, supply chain failures translate into real stakes. Broken seals, odd odors, or underprocessed jars are not small annoyances when medication schedules and frailty are involved. There's also the organic trap. Organic labeling addresses some farming inputs, but doesn't eliminate processing risks like underheating or jar seal failures. Consumers often let organic stand in for safer, but the two are not the same. A recalled organic product is still a recalled product, and for older adults, an organic label doesn't remove the need to check production codes and the condition of the jar. If a jar has been underprocessed, it can support spoilage organisms even though it started from organic tomatoes. Practical senior steps. Buy from retailers with strong turnover, so jars are less likely to sit on shelves for months. Check the jar's vacuum seal and smell before using. And keep a list of recent recalls for staple brands. If you prefer organic, pair that preference. The Mediterranean promise should be backed by transparent safety checks, not just a pretty label. Do you trust organic on a jar the same as a brand that posts lab testing? Tell us whether you check codes before buying. Organic doesn't block processing faults. A jar with a fancy label can still be underprocessed or mishandled. Bertolli's supply chain history shows big-name brands can have big slips. For seniors, label trust needs to be backed by safety checks, not marketing. Transitioning to number 5, we've got Hunt's Traditional, the familiar red jar that promises vine-ripened tomatoes and comfort. The first betrayal is easy to measure. A standard half-cup serving of Hunt's Traditional can contain roughly 530 to 560 milligrams of sodium, about a quarter of many older adults' recommended daily limit in a single ladle. That math matters for seniors who take blood pressure meds or diuretics. One heavy serving can erase a day's careful sodium budget. Open the jar, and you expect warm tomato and garlic. Instead, imagine that bright tomato smell with an undercurrent of industrial salt, the kind of flavor that hides the fact your home-style dinner just added a medication-relevant hit of sodium. Nutrition panels and retailer smart label listings consistently show Hunt's sitting well above many low-sodium options, and watchdog sites flag the brand's overall processing and ingredient profile as middling when judged for seniors' nutrition needs. That's the betrayal of trust. Marketing talks made from vine-ripened tomatoes, but the nutrition facts tell a different story for anyone watching blood pressure or fluid balance. There's a second, subtler issue: preservatives and added sugars. Some formulations use stabilizers, citric acid, and small amounts of sweeteners to even out seasonal tomato variation. For most people, that's not dramatic. For seniors on strict diets or those with metabolic syndrome, the combined effect of sodium plus added sugars and processing additives nudges risk upward over time. Consumer testing and independent reviews show wide variation across brands and even across Hunt's SKUs. Another reason to read labels, not just trust the jar art. Practical senior advice: if you use Hunt's, measure your serving and rinse excess sauce from pasta when possible, or mix half-jar Hunt's with half a low-sodium, no added sugar option to cut sodium while keeping flavor. For anyone whose doctor monitors sodium, the single serving numbers are the key fact. And Hunt's is not the low-sodium choice many image-forward labels imply. Do you check jar nutrition for sodium, or just go by taste? Drop the brand you'd swap out if you needed a lower salt option. One ladle of sauce can quietly eat a quarter of the day's safe sodium for a senior, and that's not a margin you want to gamble with. Hunt's sells tomato comfort. If you count milligrams on a med chart, comfort should come from lower sodium jars, not a heavy handful of salt in a pretty glass. Landing at number 4, Newman's Own, a brand people trust for natural and charity-minded marketing. The betrayal here is twofold: labeling disputes and allergen exposure risk in processing. Newman's Own has faced lawsuits claiming some sauces were misleadingly marketed as all-natural, despite ingredients like citric acid, and it has a history of product recalls or label corrections on other items when allergens or labeling errors surfaced. That's not a direct indictment of every jar, but for seniors with allergies, food sensitivities, or tight medication windows, any sign of inconsistent labeling is a serious worry. Open the jar expecting plain tomatoes and basil, and consider this. Class action filings and consumer watchdog reports indicate that Newman's Own sauces have been scrutinized over ingredients and labeling. Independent product ingredient databases also flag that some Newman's items are produced in facilities that handle common allergens, meaning cross-contact is possible unless you confirm the specific SKU's allergen statement. For an older adult with a nut or dairy allergy, an unexpected exposure can be far more dangerous than an upset stomach. It can mean an emergency trip and a disrupted medication schedule. The practical point isn't scare tactics. It's transparency. If a brand has had past labeling problems or recalls on other product lines, treat that as a prompt to check the UPC and allergen statements before you buy. Newman's Own does publish allergen guidelines, but independent testing and legal claims show that consumers sometimes read a natural label and assume fewer additives or less processing than the product actually contains. For seniors trying to control sodium, sugar, or hidden additives, that assumption can be costly. Have you ever bought a natural jar and later found a surprising ingredient? Name the brand and the 2 words that fooled you. Natural on the label is shorthand for marketing. not always for careful allergen control or lower processing. When a brand's legal history includes labeling disputes and allergen recalls on other products, seniors should check the jar code and ingredient list before trusting the label. Coming in at number 3, Mezzetta, a beloved West Coast brand praised for bright, chunky jars. The sauce looks fresh on the shelf, and the smell when you open a jar is often pleasantly herbal. The catch: chunky, pesto-style, or olive oil-topped sauces can mask two processing risks that matter for seniors: variable acidity and a faster spoil window once opened. And the wider industry has repeatedly shown how underprocessing or poor seals can lead to recalls. That means a beautiful jar isn't automatically a safe jar for someone who can't afford a foodborne setback. Mezzetta's own consumer guidance stresses using certain products within 5 to 7 days after opening and warns that oil may solidify in cold storage. Both signals you're handling a product that needs careful storage. Across the industry, there are many documented recalls and FDA alerts for sauces that were underprocessed, poorly sealed, or contaminated in small runs. Those events sometimes cause botulism scares or bacterial growth in jars that looked fine at first glance. While Mezzetta itself doesn't have a large public recall history matching those worst-case events, the company's product type, oil-topped, chunkier sauces and pestos, is the same style that requires strict pasteurization and sealing controls, and that means extra caution for seniors. Sensory warning signs are practical. If a jar's vacuum seal is weak, you notice a faint off smell, or oil separates and looks cloudy beyond normal olive oil solidifying, don't taste it. For older adults, even mild foodborne illness can cause dehydration or knock blood pressure and diabetes meds off schedule. The industry evidence shows underprocessing and seam failures happen frequently enough that brands and regulators publish alerts. Reading the jar code, checking the lid, and storing properly are the simplest defenses. Do you buy chunkier, oil-topped sauces for flavor and check the seal every time? Tell us which jar made you suspicious. A jar that looks artisanal can still be a factory product. Artful oil doesn't replace a strong vacuum seal. Mezzetta tastes fresh, but for seniors, the margin for error is smaller. Treat oil-topped jars like perishable goods and test the seal before you trust your plate. At number 2, Barilla tomato and basil, the glossy jar that promises no added sugar and premium ingredients. The problem here is trust. Barilla has been the target of class action litigation alleging the no preservatives or no added sugar claims are misleading because ingredients such as citric acid, a preservative, appear on labels. Consumers, including seniors who assume no preservatives, means gentler processing. We're surprised that legal action moved forward over this issue. That legal history is a red flag for anyone who relies on clear labeling to manage meds, blood sugar, or kidney load. Nutritionally, Barilla's premium sauces can be middling. Some flavors show moderate sodium. Barilla's premium lines list sodium around 400 to 430 milligrams per half cup on retailer nutrition panels, which is significant for older adults watching blood pressure. The glossy jar and premium wording can make people feel safe, but the numbers are the numbers. A few ladles, and you can be well into the range that alters medication effects or daily limits for sodium and potassium. Because Barilla is a big brand, these are important talking points for seniors choosing a reliable, low-sodium option. Finally, the takeaways are practical. Barilla is not a dirty brand, but lawsuits over labeling and the straightforward nutrition math means seniors should read ingredient lists and serving sizes. Don't assume premium equals medication-friendly. If you depend on strict sodium or phosphate limits, pick jars with explicit low-sodium labels, or go with a brand that posts lab testing and transparent ingredient sourcing. Did Barilla's label language surprise you, or do you pick it because the taste beats the numbers? Which Barilla flavor do you avoid for health reasons? Glossy jars and no preservatives claims don't replace a label check. Let the nutrition facts, not the marketing, guide your med-sensitive choices. Barilla looks safe on the shelf. For seniors, the safest choice is the one where the milligrams match your doctor's plan. Read the panel. At number 1, we've got Ragu's Homemade, the jar that sells artisan flavor and premium price. The look and smell deliver the promise, but the record behind the label is a different story. Ragu's has faced several recalls and labeling mistakes in recent years, and those incidents matter for seniors who need predictable, safe pantry staples. Open a jar and it smells like slow-simmered tomatoes and garlic. That's the appeal. The betrayal comes in 3 practical ways. First, Ragu's and related products have been subject to recalls for mislabeled contents and undeclared allergens. For example, a 2023 recall involved mislabeled soup jars that contained undeclared egg, and separate actions were issued for Rao's branded products that may contain undeclared tree nuts. Those aren't minor PR headaches. They're the kinds of mistakes that put people with allergies or strict diets at real risk. If a jar's label can't be trusted to list allergens correctly, that's a safety problem, not just an annoyance. Second, there have been limited product runs pulled or questioned for packing errors and mislabeling. A production mix-up that fills a jar with the wrong product can mean the presence of ingredients a buyer never expected. For a senior on a restrictive diet or a specific medication schedule, an unexpected allergen or a mislabeled product can cause an emergency room visit or a missed dose, outcomes that go far beyond a ruined dinner. Those recalls show that even premium brands can suffer breakdowns in tracking and labeling control. Third, consumer reports and social posts sometimes describe foreign objects or odd particles in jars. These accounts are not the same as confirmed recalls, but they illustrate why vigilance matters. When you combine real recalls with scattered consumer complaints, the reasonable response for someone with higher vulnerability is caution. That means checking best buy dates, batch codes, and recall lists before use, and returning or discarding any jar showing odd smells, bulging lids, or unexpected textures. Senior-focused advice. If you like Rao's flavor, buy single jars from stores with high turnover, check the UPC and best buy codes against official recall postings, and inspect the lid and aroma before heating. For people with compromised immunity or strict medication regimens, a jar from a brand with documented labeling errors is a risk you don't need to take regularly. When a high-end jar has repeated labeling or recall incidents, premium no longer equals predictable. Coming in as one of the two that are actually worth it, Victoria Marinara, transparent labeling and low-sodium options. Victoria shows up on many recommended lists because several of its SKUs are straightforward, short ingredient lists, clear labeling, and some lower sodium offerings. For shoppers who must manage blood pressure and kidney load, that transparency is useful. When the label is simple, you can calculate sodium and ingredient risks without guesswork. Consumer safety listings and recall databases show Victoria has had a limited recall in the past, undeclared cashew in a specific 40-ounce run in 2019. But that event was narrow and publicly documented. If you check your jar code, you can confirm whether your jar was affected. In short, Victoria is easier to verify than many brands, and that traceability matters for seniors. Sensory and practical points. Victoria jars usually smell clean and tomato-forward with a simple texture, not syrupy, not over-seasoned. That makes portion control easier. You can use less and still get tomato flavor without a heavy sodium hit. Many Victoria labels list sodium per serving clearly, so a quick label check tells you how a half cup will affect your daily limit. If you're on blood pressure meds or a low sodium plan, that clarity is a real benefit. Caveat and safety tip. Victoria's 2019 recall for undeclared cashews shows that no brand is immune to mistakes. That recall was limited and public, but it's the exact reason seniors should check jar UPCs and recall pages before use. Buying from stores with rapid stock turnover, inspecting seals, and favoring smaller jars reduces the chance you'll have a problem from a single production run. If you or someone in your home has a nut allergy, don't assume any jar is safe without checking the batch code. Do you check jar UPCs against recall lists, or do you trust the label on the shelf? Tell us if you found a recalled pantry item and how the store handled it. A jar that lists milligrams clearly gives you power. Don't give that power away by assuming organic or traditional means low sodium. Victoria can be smart pantry fuel if you read the code and the label, but past recalls mean you should always check before you cook. Finally, at the second actually worth it pick, Muir Glen Organic Tomato Basil, organic sourcing, clear labeling, and low processing concerns. Muir Glen stands out for 3 reasons that matter for seniors: certified organic sourcing, transparent ingredient lists, and consistently positive third-party ratings. The brand's tomato basil sauce is USDA, organic and non-GMO, project verified, and it scores well on independent evaluations for low processing concerns and straightforward ingredients. Those traits lower the chance of hidden additives, surprise sugars, or unnecessary preservatives, all good for people managing blood pressure, blood sugar, or kidney load. Taste and texture notes. Muir Glen's jars tend to taste like tomatoes with a clean herb note rather than heavy sugar or syrup. That means you get the savory tomato profile without extra sweeteners that push glucose up. Because the ingredient list is short and simple, you can portion and season to taste, keeping sodium under control. Consumer reports and EWG data back up the brand's profile as a better choice on nutrition and processing grounds. Safety and sourcing. Muir Glen cans and jars are processed under standard commercial controls, and the brand publishes product details that make traceability easier if there's ever a recall. No brand is risk-free. Tomatoes and tomato products globally face occasional supply chain recalls. For example, broader tomato recalls linked to salmonella in 2024 to 2025 affected many suppliers. But Muir Glen's organic sourcing and lower processing footprint reduce the number of added ingredients that can hide problems. For seniors, that lower ingredient complexity translates into fewer surprises at the table and in lab reports. Practical senior tips. Pick Muir Glen's plain tomato basil or crushed tomato lines, check labels for added salt, buy from stores with good turnover, and keep open jars refrigerated and used within the brand's recommended window. If you need very low sodium, look for their no salt added options or mix the jar with low sodium crushed tomatoes to dilute the salt per serving. Muir Glen gives real tomato flavor without marketing spin. For seniors, that honesty makes it one of the few jarred sauces you can rely on regularly. Don't risk your health on sauces that promise tradition but deliver hidden dangers. Subscribe now, and I'll show you which pasta sauces are safe, wholesome, and truly worth your trust every single week.